U.S. Department of Energy's Oak Ridge Reservation is the site of a vital national defense facility and a modern computational and scientific center. But over the years, parts of the reservation have been contaminated with radioactive and other hazardous waste. DOE has been busy cleaning up those affected areas, but much remains to be done. Citizen input is a valuable part of that effort, and DOE welcomes advice from the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup of the Oak Ridge Reservation. The board provides input on a wide range of environmental cleanup operations underway at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Y-12 National Security Complex, and the East Tennessee Technology Park. You can be part of this important work by attending the monthly meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. For more information, call or visit our website.
All right. Well, welcome back, everybody. Gosh, it's been, I think, a year since we've had one of these meetings. So it's so good to see everyone. For those of you that have got your camera on, for those of you that are new or just joining for this evening, welcome. Thanks for being here. I don't have any particular announcements this evening, so I'll throw it over to our federal and state agency reps to see if anyone has anything they'd like to share. Jay, anything from you?
Sure. So been a while since I've been here. Certainly am not dressed like I normally am in this new relaxed state. And I've had to adjust the lighting in this room a bit. Otherwise, it kind of makes me look like I'm in the witness protection program. So sorry about that. It changes throughout the day as it gets brighter and lighter out. So if you see me getting dark, let me know and I can adjust it again. But wanted to start this evening by saying it's been a while since our last meeting. We're excited to get together and start providing input and getting input again. I did want to recognize some new folks that are on the board. So Chris Hample owns and operates a small business, Pressure Washing Solutions, and he is a resident of Kingston. Gregory Malone is a retired medical products development consultant. He's a resident of Rockwood. Thomas McCormick is the city manager for the city or town of Oliver Springs. He lives in Jacksboro. Michael Sharp is a SharePoint administrator for Oak Ridge Associated Universities. He's a resident of Lenore City. Thomas Tuck, a retired banking executive with 10 Bank and is a resident of Knoxville. And Zachary Wilkins is a senior industrial hygiene technician with Value Added Solutions Incorporated, and he's a resident of Wartburg. So want to tell you, I appreciate you guys making the time to do this. I know there's a lot of things we could be doing with our time other than this. So thank you very much for taking the time to be on our SSAB. Your input greatly does aid our program and efforts in Oak Ridge. I want to thank the existing members as well for your service and patience as we've gone through all this pandemic and trying to figure out a new way to operate here. So I appreciate your willingness to meet virtually and still continue to get your input. So I would like to update you a little bit since the last time we met. Some of this you may know because of the news, some of it you may not know. But some program highlights we've had is we did complete the core cleanup at ETTP last fall when we made Vision 2020. That marks DOE's largest completed D&D project. It's the first time in the world that an enrichment complex, a complete enrichment complex, has been removed. And to just give you perspective, everybody keeps hearing how great Rocky was. Depending on how you want to count it, this is 5 to 8 times the size of Rocky and our accomplishments. So I'm pretty proud of my team and the UCOR team that made that happen. Certainly couldn't have done it without all the partnerships between the feds, contractors, labor, the SSAB, our stakeholders and regulators, and our sister programs in Oak Ridge. So we certainly feel like partnerships is what makes us successful, and we look forward to having those continued partnerships. Crews out there right now are continuing to address the remaining soil remediation, and certainly starting to talk to the regulators about what kind of groundwater remediation projects we need to achieve the ultimate vision for the site and have that turned over for industrial development. So the majority of the workforce that was working out there is now transitioned over to Y-12 and ORNL. And we have a couple of demo projects, in fact, underway over at both those sites as well. 3026, which is a hot cell facility at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. We're actually doing the demo of it under a large tent because of the close proximity to downtown ORNL. It's right across the street from a new facility that Oak Ridge National Laboratory is building, and it's right there on Central Avenue. So pretty excited about that. We also started the biology complex out at Y12. We've actually completed demolition of, there's 2 large buildings left out there. We completed the demo of one of those 2 large buildings at the end of February and have started the second large building earlier this week. We do have a new confirmed secretary that I'm sure you've seen, Jennifer Granholm. She was confirmed at the end of February. She is a former 2-term governor of Michigan. So if I can get the lighting to stop doing that flickering thing. And we're supporting the transition of her team, getting folks up to speed on what we do at the various sites. And so she is continuing to bring in new members for her team. I think David Turk, the deputy secretary, has made it through the committee and is scheduled in the next few weeks to go in front of the full Senate for his confirmation. But within EM right now, our leadership really has not changed yet. Now, I would assume that would, and once you get a deputy secretary, the assistant secretaries will start getting filled in. But as of right now, it's still Ike White. And we have a new regulatory framework in place with TDEC and EPA that we just hit the one-year anniversary of that. We feel like that's been very helpful in accelerating discussions and resolutions on regulatory topics, at least from my perspective. I think it has gone a long ways in repairing some of the relationships as well, which had become strained over the years. And we did resolve a formal dispute between DOE and EPA of regulatory water discharge limits. And we are on track, I think, based on everything I'm hearing so far, to issue a record of decision or submit that record of decision on EMDF by July, which is the milestone. And with that, thanks, and I'll turn it over to the next speaker. I'm not sure whether that's TDEC or EPA.
Ms. Connie, what do you have this evening?
I don't have anything to announce, with the exception of as we've gone through the administration change, we do have a new acting regional administrator. And so that is John Blevins. I believe some of the people up there in DOE may be familiar with him. So as Jay stated, as soon as we get an administrator, I think get him confirmed, then we'll have a new regional administrator. So we're in the same boat, if you will, as DOE, waiting on our senior leaders to come on board. Other than programmatic matters, I have no comments to make about those or announcements. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And Mr. Kristoff. I think I saw his name. Maybe not. Anybody from TDEC?
Good evening. Sorry, I have some problem navigating, including video. I happen not to be able to start it, but good evening, welcome everyone. State of Tennessee doesn't have any special announcements or comments.
Great, okay. All right, Jay, well with that, I'm gonna hand things back to you for the budget presentation.
Okay, Shelley, are you going to pull that up or? I hope.
I think Shelley Kimmel has the presentations, but I can grab it if we need it. Let's see. Meeting presentation. All right. Let's see if we can do this. I'll see if I can get it up here. Y'all let me know if you can see my screen.
Perfect.
All right.
So I'm curious if I can, I guess I can't advance it. So you can go to the next screen.
Well, it's actually not letting me advance it.
All right, let me go see if I can find, sorry about this. Let me see if I can, and by the way, this one's a little longer than normal. Staff wanted me to cut it down, but there's some things I thought, because it had been a while, that I thought I might want you guys to hear. So y'all might be interested in. So
Um,
looking through my email. I think that came from Ben.
I don't know if we lost Shelley. Her mic is off.
Guys, I've got it.
Okay.
For some reason, it was still muting me. I've got the PowerPoint. I'm about to share it in just a sec.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thanks,
I'm
Shelley.
not sure why it wouldn't let me advance it. So.
Yeah, about every time I think I have figured Zoom out,
I'm just having to load the.
something gets thrown in.
This is Harriet, and I think Zoom has gremlins.
Teams definitely does.
Yeah. Yeah. Luckily, I've not had to try to learn Teams really, but headquarters uses WebEx a lot for us, and trying to flip between Zoom and WebEx is kind of like occasionally trying to get on an Android if you're used to an iPhone. It's similar, but just enough difference to throw you off. So you can go to the next slide. Is that too small for y'all to see? Better. There you go. So, boy, that fine print on my screen, at least, is awful small. What this is really intended to show you is that the federal budget is about a 3-year process. So there'll be the current year you're in, there's a year you're planning for, and then another year you're starting to do the budget build on as well. And right now, even though we're executed in 21 and we're expecting soon the pass back on 22, we're actually starting the budget build process for 23, which is where the agencies will develop and submit a budget for OMB for their review. And so that process is just starting to kick off. In fact, there'll be a series of briefings I'll have to do in the next few weeks to headquarters over, within ranges what we could do. And so that's really the budget that we're interested in getting your input on. Last year, you've already given us input on how we would try to build the 22 budget. So that's really the purpose of this slide. If you want to go to the next slide, please, Shelley. And so this gives you an idea that, and so you have all the agencies that build an overall executive branch budget, and then drilling down a little bit more into where DOE gets its money and how that money is distributed. You can look and see last year or in 21, we got about 7.6 billion. Of that, you can see how that was split up. The majority, the single largest thing is tank waste, and that exclusively goes to Savannah River site in Idaho. And then everybody else gets pieces of the rest of this. And so to give you and what you end up doing because of that is competing with all the other sites for the rest of the budget, including Savannah River and Idaho. So they get the majority of the tank waste, and then they get some of the rest of it. So that kind of gives you an idea of the competition that goes on between the sites over where the budget comes from and how that's distributed. If you want to go to the next slide. And this just shows you all the sites right now. Oak Ridge in EM. Oak Ridge is the one that is the yellow star. The rest of the white stars are just the various sites throughout DOE. If you'd looked at this 10 years ago, there were actually a lot more sites. So slowly but surely, we're whittling the sites down. If you want to go to the next slide. And so last year, you can see where we fell kind of in the ranking. We were, for the last several years, we've gotten very good plus ups. Of course, we no longer have Senator Alexander in the Senate. And so I don't know what the future will bring with regard to plus ups, but my suspicion is we will not see the kind of plus ups in Oak Ridge that we've seen in the past. So last year, our president's budget, which is what we're working on in 23, that's what's called the president's budget that'll be submitted. Last year in 21, that president's budget was 450 million, 430 million, something along those lines. And we got a substantial plus up above that the Senate and House passed, the Congress passed for us through the appropriations. And that had been the case for the last several years. So I would expect that number to come down some because we don't have as strong an advocate. And we also, our senators are Republican senators. They no longer hold the Senate as well. So that has the potential for making a difference as well. We're on the next slide. So this I talked about that a little bit. You can see what the enacted budgets have been over the years. The point here is that we get our appropriations in three major buckets. So defense environmental cleanup, which is where you've really seen the majority of the increase in funds over the last several years. That's what pays for the cleanup at Y-12 and Oak Ridge National Laboratory. The UED, and that's where we compete with all the other sites, and to some degree with Department of Defense as well for those cleanup funds. The UED&D fund, which is the one towards the bottom, that's what pays for the cleanup at East Tennessee Technology Park. And you can see that we're getting less and less work out there. You're going to see the budget out there taper some over the next several years since the major D&D is done. I'd say we're roughly a quarter to a third done with the soil cleanup, and we have yet to accomplish the groundwater remedies. And we have to get agreement with the regulators on what those will be. That one in the middle, the non-defense, that's a very small amount that has come in for the last several years to the Historic Preservation Mission. As we finish that mission up with the History Center, the equipment building, et cetera, that's associated with the Manhattan National Park out there in the old K-25 building, those funds will go away. I cannot use defense funds at ETTP, and I cannot use UED&D funds at Oak Ridge National Lab and Y-12 for cleanup. So even though the bottom line number looks pretty good, we also have to be very careful about how we allot those funds at the different sites. And we compete, so UED&D is used at East Tennessee Technology Park, but also at the other two former gaseous diffusion plants at Paducah and Portsmouth. And that's the only place those funds can be used for cleanup. Want to go to the next page, please, or slide. So this just kind of is a different display about where all we spend and how that defense funds, that $484 million last year, has been allocated to the different programs and activities we have here. And by the way, I can't just move money. For instance, if I have a underrun on the second one there, true waste processing and sludge testing, let's say I have 112 in a year, but I only spent 80, but I could certainly use that down on the Mercury Treatment facility. I can't transfer it without getting congressional approval. So these are additional buckets of money that through the appropriations language, there's very little ability for me to transfer much funding between those different buckets as well. So it makes things a little complicated when it comes to the funds. And, you know, people will often look at the, that don't fully understand or appreciate this, will often look and say, well, you've had this project you got done on this D&D project. Why can't you spend that on groundwater? Why can't you spend that on soils? And a lot of times it's because we've got these kind of buckets. And it's just by the time we could go through the congressional notification and approval process, the months it takes to do that, usually you're into the next appropriation cycle anyway. So it's called a reprogramming, but those are usually very lengthy in time to take place. So if you want to go to the next slide. So a few years ago, when Mark Whitney was the manager here, we established a program plan. You could think of that as our strategic plan, and it had a number of goals in them. These were the ones that are really directly related to project and cleanup type work. So you can, I'm not going to read these, but what this helps do is set a clear understanding amongst the employees, amongst the stakeholders, and amongst our contractors on what our major goals are. And what you will see is most of our contracts are aligned to incentivize reaching these goals. And you can see the ones we've made. Now, The first one there is only partially checked. We completed the demo, but we have not completed the remedial actions out there yet. But we did complete the disposition campaign for U-233. We still have the other half of the inventory to go. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And so it's really just to demonstrate that we have some high-level goals we've been working on for several years now. Go on the next page. So this was a view in 1989, a few years before I showed up out at East Tennessee Technology Park. And I think in the next couple of slides, you're going to see that none of those buildings exist anymore. So if you want to go to the next slide. So we did, yeah, there you go. So we did, I did mention earlier in the opening remarks, Reaching Vision 2020, we had the celebration. Obviously, it was a bit muted because of COVID-19 concerns and a limited number of folks could actually attend. We did live stream the event. We do still have soil and groundwater remediation projects ongoing at the site, but it was a very positive event. Certainly for those of you who were able to participate either in person or by video, certainly appreciate you guys doing that. This is a major milestone for Oak Ridge and for the EM program. So we will go to the next slide. And this just gives you now a bird's eye of what it looks like today. In fact, a lot of that, what appears to be dirt is now seeded ground out there. If you went out there with all this rain we've had up until very recently, it looks very lush in some areas. So you want to go to the next? And so part of what we're doing out there is trying to make as much land available for transfer and reindustrialization as possible. For me to get it off the DOE books is a good thing because that gets it off the government rolls and reduces our environmental liabilities. And to date, we've transferred about 1,300 acres of land out there. We've got another 600 acres available for transfer. In fact, we've got a couple of transfer packages making their way through headquarters right now to transfer some small parcels to the city of Oak Ridge. Koki Pharma and Kairos Power have both announced plans to locate at East Tennessee Technology Park. One of them out on what's called Duct Island. That's Koki, who has a reactor out there that produce medical isotopes, and then Kairos Power has shown interest in the old K33 building area as well. So if you want to go to the next slide. So, of course, one of our major missions out there, and I did mention that, was the commemoration of the Manhattan Project and the Cold War era workers. We did go into it. It's a pretty interesting museum. There's actually some artifacts in it that are personally fascinating to me because when I first came to work here, I was out in some of the old GDP buildings in the mid-90s and saw some of those artifacts still there. That are now located over in the History Center. So it's pretty cool concept as well about how you go through. You get a badge, kind of like what you might have to do if you were a worker back then and badge through. So I would suggest you go out there. It's pretty cool when you get a chance. So next slide. So what's left to do, right? Talked about what we've done. So what's left to do? On your left there, you see Y12. On your right, you see kind of the central campus of Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And the buildings that are red colored are all the excess contaminated facilities that are left to be demolished, deactivated, deconned, and for us to get rid of. So over at Y12, many of those buildings are very large process contaminated buildings. The ones that you kind of see in the upper right-hand side, there's 3 buildings. It actually looks like 2 buildings. So there's actually 3 buildings, Beta 4, Alpha 5, and Alpha 4. That's where a lot of the Mercury operations went on. And so that will be one of the areas we go after to deal with the Mercury. Out there and over at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, in the area you see there, and kind of in the middle of all those buildings, you'll see a 2-story kind of blue maybe Battleship or haze gray kind of blue. That's the graphite reactor, if that kind of orients you. And so many of the buildings you see in very close proximity to the graphite reactor were also research reactors. And then kind of it's down the hill, but on the picture, it's kind of up to the left a little bit. There's kind of a row of buildings. That's Isotope Row, and that's a bunch of hot cell facilities. And so there's millions of curies of radioactive material out there that we need to deal with. And obviously at both sites, there's both soil and groundwater contamination that once we deal with the buildings that are on top of it, that provided the source term for much of the soil and groundwater contamination, we will then have to go after the soil and groundwater as well. So lots of work left to do. Also at ORNL, we have the True Waste mission. You cannot see that on this picture. It would be off kind of up and to the left. And we also have the U-233 mission, which is on here. It's in one of the buildings or two of the buildings you can see. And we've shipped about half of the U-233 off-site. Excuse me. And we've got an operation going on right now. We were actually down milking thorium out of some of the lower assay U-233 and down blending it and shipping it off-site. And that's in a glove box. At the same time, we're building out the hot cell because to be able to do that same process, but in hot cells, because the rest of the material, we can't work in a glove box because it's so hot, the workers can't be close to it. So you'll have to do that remotely through a hot cell. Go to the next slide. So some things we need to do to get ready for D&D at those two sites is build our Outfall 200 Mercury Treatment facility at Oak Ridge or at Y12. I talked about the Mercury area. The buildings are contaminated. The soil is contaminated with the mercury that was used out there in some of the Cold War processes. There's an outfall that's really the first daylight for a lot of the sumps and drains and subsurface features that were out there that have some of the mercury in it. And that's how the mercury first gets into East Fork Poplar Creek. And so we're building Outfall 200 Mercury Treatment Facility. It actually consists of two large facilities. One is what's called the Headworks facility, and that's actually right there at Outfall 200 and will capture the water that comes out. Due to the congestion that's there in some of the other buildings, we actually pipe it down several hundred feet downstream where it will go into a treatment facility where we'll actually remove the mercury out of it. This becomes both a feature for protecting waters, but also becomes very important to us as a control measure, because what we've found over the years is as we start disturbing soils, as we disturb building structures, which actually have absorbed the mercury, we would see an increase in the flux of the mercury coming out into the water. So before we really start that D&D in earnest, we need this as a control measure put in place. So we're actively building that. We also need the environmental management disposal facilities, the second surplus cell. The current cell that we have, which is known as EMWMF, that's about 75 to 80% full right now with the waste that came over from E2TP. We were able to expand the capacity of that particular cell, working with the regulators to redesign the cap to allow us to put more waste in it. We also incentivized our contractor a few years ago to use a waste hierarchy where they would really interrogate the waste to be able to send it to other landfills that we operate on site to try to save that storage space. But the bottom line is, with the amount of material that is going to be generated in doing the cleanup at Y12 and ORNL, we're going to need another on-site cell. So we're working with the regulators. I mentioned earlier about the ROD. Part of what had delayed that was the dispute over radioactive effluent discharge levels. That's been resolved. And so we've been working closely with getting together a ROD that we think when we submit it should be pretty well approvable. We also need there's a haul road. Many of you are aware of the haul road that comes from East Tennessee Technology Park over to the landfill and kept all these trucks and things out of commerce. We also need that over going all the way over to Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So we're currently building a haul road. It's using an existing road, but there's improvements that have to be done to it to be able to bring waste out of Commerce from Oak Ridge National Laboratory over to the disposal cells as well. And of course, if I have all these workers and staff moving from East Tennessee Technology Park over to Oronell and Y12, I have to have office space and equipment storage space for the heavy equipment. So we've had to work all this in conjunction with NNSA and Science as well, who, by the way, both have major improvement activities going on and construction activities such as UPF at their site at NNSA. And of course, they've got improvement activities going on. I mentioned earlier a new building that Oak Ridge National Laboratory is building as well. So lots of coordination. Never thought my job would be all about logistics, but that's what it seems to be getting to. So if you want to go to the next page. So I did mention earlier the U-233 that's stored at Oronell. This is pretty important to us because it drives the security at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. So this building and this material is in a high security area comparable to what you have over at Y12 behind the PIDUS. And if we can reduce this inventory down and get it disposed of, then that allows the Oak Ridge National Laboratory to reduce its security requirements, which reduces the expense and frees up money to do other things. So to date, about half the inventory has been disposed of through what was called direct disposition. The rest of it has to be down blended, and we're milking thorium off of that. There is a third-party agreement that Isotech reached with a company called TerraPower, where they milk the thorium out of the U-233 before it's down blended, solidified, and disposed, and they sell that material to TerraPower. Part of that agreement for allowing them to use government facilities to do it, they pay us back. So that's actually reduced the cost of what it would normally be to the taxpayer to dispose of this material. So they're helping offset some of the cost of this by doing that. The low dose inventory I mentioned earlier is being worked in glove box. You can see there on the upper right is the glove box where they down blend that material. And the high dose processing is scheduled now to begin towards the end of this year. Currently, they're doing the work. Isotech is doing the work in the hot cells to get those prepared for this processing within the hot cells. And the thorium is being used, it's being milked and given to TerraPower. That's actually being used for cancer research and cancer treatment. Next slide. So the true waste, we continue to process true waste, both contact handled and remote handled out at the true waste processing facility. You'll hear a lot of us throw around the acronym TWPC. Just kind of rolls off after a while. So forgive me if I start using acronyms. I don't mean to. It just, I guess, nature of the job after a while. We continue, although not probably as much as we would like to ship, but we do continue to ship contact handled transuranic waste off-site to WIP for disposal. Right now, Idaho is getting the priority along with Los Alamos National Lab, and then the waste control specialists, the material that's stored there down in Texas. That material got stored there because of the explosion that had occurred, or deflagration, I guess is a technical term for it, that had occurred out at WIP a few years ago and shut WIP down. That material came from Lannel, and some of it was stored at WCS. So the department's interested in getting that material dealt with pretty quick as possible. But we do get the occasional shipment to be able to ship our waste out there. The remote handled waste, they're not ready to receive remote handled waste. So we continue to process that, put it in special casks that we designed for storage, and store that over at Oak Ridge National Laboratory for future shipment. And we do have true sludge contained in tanks out there from processes that occurred and are occurring at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. There is a little bit of sludge produced by some of the processes at HIFER and REDC that continues to be generated. And so we eventually will have to deal with that tank waste as well. And so we have a project underway right now to research and prove the technology. And part of that is building a mock-up facility known as the sludge treatment facility, or sludge test facility, sorry. The sludge test facility out at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And that will be where we put some of this equipment together, use surrogate material to prove that it'll work. And so that project is going on right now. So we go to the next page. And so I had mentioned earlier the Outfall 200 Mercury Treatment Facility. We are actively working that facility. The slide on the left is actually the treatment facility. So it's going along pretty well now. We have had, because of the depth of the hole that we're having to dig, and the one on the right probably doesn't really do justice to the depth of the hole, but that's the treatment work site, or I'm sorry, the capture work site, head work site. And that has caused us a little bit of delays due to some soft zones that we ran into, but we think we have finally figured all that out. And the contractor is now trying to figure out how to recover schedule, and they are starting to recover schedule. So we expect that facility to become operational in 2025. It is fully funded. So we don't need additional funds for that. Congress actually gave us the full funding over a couple of years, over the last 2 years. Next slide. So one of the things we've talked about is our mercury treatment, need to deal with mercury on site. There's also mercury from historic releases that are out in East Fork Poplar Creek that goes through Oak Ridge. And so one of the things we're looking at is how best, and working with Oak Ridge National Laboratory, how best to deal with that mercury. I don't think anybody wants us to go out there with heavy equipment and rip the stream up. And so there's a lot of research that we've got going on right now with how can we manipulate the pH of the water or the chemistry of the water? Can we manipulate the fauna such that we can reduce down the amount of mercury that's being released into the environment? The mercury that's out there is stable until it gets exposed, and then it gets methylated that we think by the algae gets eaten, and it bioaccumulates as it goes up in the ecosystem. So, the little critters eat the algae, then the fish eat the algae, or eat the little critters, and the bigger fish, the bass eat the smaller fish. And so you just get this concentration of mercury going up. We've also they're actually looking at freshwater mussels and clams who can potentially clear mercury out of the water. And we funded, as part of this last year or a couple of years ago, we funded, and they've completed an expansion of the aquatics ecology laboratory over at Oak Ridge National Laboratory. And you see a couple pictures there. At some point when we can, again, it's a pretty cool tour to go on. We took Paul DeBar through it. The secretary's been through it. Congressman Fleshman's been through it. So it's a pretty neat place, and we can certainly, for any of you that haven't been through it, if we can ever open the place up again, I would suggest we take you through it and let you see it, because it's kind of neat what they're doing. Next page. Of course, I've talked about this earlier. This is the existing cell that you see now, and this is a bit older picture. Because much of the cell on the right side, there's 6 cells here, and much of those towards the right-hand side there, that's kind of the darker red, is now covered and has been used and isn't available for further use. 75 to 80% full. We did have a proposed plan approved by EPA and TDEC, and we're on schedule. I talked about that to submit the ROD. So next page for the new cell. So we do one of our key things is to remain investment worthy and to finish what we start, and that's 2 of our key objectives and guiding principles within my organization. We work with our contractors to do that. One of the things I did not mention is the completion of ETTP demo was done 4 years ahead of schedule, $80 million under cost, which was a cost savings to the taxpayer and the environmental liabilities of about $500 million. So we strive to continue to do that. We certainly take our responsibility, being good stewards of the taxpayers' money, very, very, very seriously. And we do want to work with our federal, state, and local partners to advance cleanup that everybody can get behind. Next page. So we do use your recommendations. Certainly appreciate all those recommendations, and it helps us both better understand the community's perspective from the various communities and stakeholders that have interest in the greater Oak Ridge area. And it also helps provide support for our program. We've enjoyed very good support here in Oak Ridge from the community, and we certainly appreciate that. And this is a way for the community to provide both input, but also provide support for the program. Next slide. So, sorry if that was a bit long. I know that's longer than what we normally present to you, but having gone through these and having been quite some time, I think, since we've really had full programs, I thought it would be useful, especially with the new members, to maybe go a little bit longer. And so happy to take questions at this time. Happy to take them and redirect them to Dave, Melissa, and other people to answer.
Let's open things up to members of the board first, and then we'll open the floor up to guests. If we have a member of the board that has a question, can you use the raise hand feature, and then we'll acknowledge you. Any questions out there?
By the way, I do have my federal project directors here, along with Alan Stokes, my budget guy. So we truly can answer your questions, even if Jay can't.
Okay, I see a hand from Mr. John Tapp.
My question is, with the rod just about finished, where is the city of Oak Ridge in terms of its support or lack thereof with the EMDF?
Well, to be honest with you, I haven't heard a lot out of the city lately, but the city, of course, is represented by the state. And obviously, once the ROD is submitted and approved, it does go through a public comment process. So, Dave, I don't know if you have more you might add to that, or any better insight than I have.
Yeah. I think that the city recognizes the need for a landfill for the higher volume, low hazard material that's generated by the cleanup program. That's the bulk of what we generate. 90% of what we generate is building, demolition, rubble, concrete, blocks, wood, a lot of soil. What the city's focused on is trying to make sure that the most hazardous materials don't end up in Oak Ridge. So we've been looking at ways of making sure that, in particular, mercury waste streams that contain high levels of mercury don't end up in that disposal cell. That's been a big focus of theirs. So I don't want to speak for the city, but I think a fair general statement is that their focus has been on what goes into the cell as opposed to whether or not we have adequate disposal capacity to drive the cleanup program.
Yeah, one thing I did not mention back when we were talking about the Mercury Research, we do have plans as well. We've got a procurement underway right now, and here within the next year should have a follow-on contractor to the UCOR contract, which does expire. And so one of the things we're looking at is also spending some additional funds on research of mercury. In other words, methodologies, not really research as in brand new techniques, but are there techniques that are out there? Is there equipment and methods that may work over here that with a little bit of modification would work well for us? for being able to pull more mercury out of the soils, more mercury out of the building material, or stabilize it so that there's not a question about it leaching out. And so we are going to spend some funds on that as well. And certainly the ARRs that we will work through with the regulators will ensure that whatever we put in the landfill is protected.
Other questions from the board? I don't see any other hands right now. Let's go ahead and open things up to members of the public. If you could also raise your hand. I don't see any hands. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jay, for the presentation. It's always great to hear the progress, certainly this year, seeing the ETT cleanup and the completion effort there. That's just a huge milestone. And so the board, of course, is excited to see that. Thank you guys for all that you're doing. And with that, go ahead, Jay.
Well, I was just going to say, I think somebody on the chat function says they don't know how to raise their hand or can't find it. It says, I don't see a raise hand function.
I see it.
Option.
Oh, that's Michael Sharp.
Go ahead. Michael, if you want to open your mic, you can go right ahead.
Okay, appreciate it. Yeah, I don't, normally it's in the participant window and it's not there or at the bottom, so I'm not sure what happened to that.
Oh, it's the smiley face on mine. So there's a smiley face.
It's in the reactions little tab now.
Oh, okay, fair enough. But yeah, I was kind of curious. So what guidelines will be used for the materials when they go into those new facilities, and who's going to determine the discharges that come out of the like the leachate that comes out of it? Like who's going to determine the like what's okay with that? Like how's that going to be determined?
So there's limits that are set through the regulatory process. So there, I mentioned ARRs, there'll be ARRs, but eventually this develops into a waste acceptance criteria that will be set for the landfill. The existing landfill has one. Any landfill has a waste acceptance criteria that will dictate what type of waste can go into it. That generally is driven by what's in the ARRs and or modeling that we will do for the radiological constituents. And of course, that to some degree is driven by the discharge limits that are set by state and EPA for any leachate or any other water that might come out. That backs up into, it takes into account whatever type of treatment facility we might put in place. And then, of course, what type of material goes in. And for this particular facility, we have made the commitment to build some type of on-site treatment facility. The current facility, water is collected and tankered if it needs to be treated, is tankered over to the liquid gaseous waste operations treatment facilities at Oak Ridge National Lab. But for this landfill, as part of the budget and part of the process, we got authorized to build a on-site treatment facility. So Dave, I don't know if you want to talk any more about the details of the CERCLA process on that.
Well, just a little bit, Jay. It's a good question, and we're actually focusing on those two issues right now. It's something we're working very closely with the state and EPA on, both what goes in the cell and what limits are used to control any water discharges from the cell. Of course, we went through all that already for the first cell. We have those systems in place. What we're doing now is to refine those to make sense for the new cell. Generally speaking, as Jay said, for most landfills and for chemical constituents, there's already a body of regulations in place. We call them ARRs a lot. The ARR stands for applicable or relevant appropriate requirements. But the point I want to make is that there are regulations in place that define discharge limit requirements. On the what's coming in side of the equation, Again, we're working through that right now with the state. We probably will have a public workshop on that before too long, once we have a reasonable agreement with the state and EPA on how to structure these waste acceptance requirements. We already know they wouldn't allow for receipt of any high activity or high chemical hazard materials. That's already decided. All that type of material goes out west. And there are also a lot of regulations in place for waste acceptance criteria. For example, you're not allowed to take liquids into the landfill.
Michael, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's enough. Thank you, Michelle.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.
And I see Leon has his hand up. Leon.
Yeah, just real quick, Jay. I'm curious. I know we've lost our chairman of our appropriations committee with Alexander, but I noticed a presentation that Fleischman done in Alexandria for the DOE workshop. I'm curious, do we have more allies like Burchett and Haggerty and Blackburn that may step up to assist us? I felt like Fleischman's presentation in Alexandria, he was really pro cleanup, pro DOE, and I felt like that even though we're losing Alexander, we're gaining a congressman that's stepping up with some seniority. What's your personal vibe on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, Congressman Fleischman's have been, had unflagging support for our program, and I don't want to diminish his contributions at all. He's been a powerful ally in the House for us. And, he's co-chair, has been co-chair, and I think now is going to be chair of the cleanup caucus. I think that's the last I heard. I think that's accurate. He, at the very least, will retain the co-chairship, but I think he may be the chair now of the cleanup caucus. So that's a powerful ally in the House. Certainly, in here most recently, I was personally happy to hear that the new senator Haggerty has agreed to be on appropriations as well. So I do think that we do have some good allies here in our representatives and senators. Certainly Senator Blackburn, while she hasn't been as engaged as Senator Alexander in the past, we certainly have toured her through the facilities at times. She was here for one of the big celebrations for the U-233 last year. So she has shown interest, and Congressman Burchett has come over and toured the facilities as well and has interest, which I think is good. We didn't always have interest out of the Knoxville representatives in the past, but Congressman Burchett has shown a lot of interest in it. And that makes some sense because, 60% of the workforce that comes to Oak Ridge every day lives in Knox County.
Correct.
So it was always, and I live in Knox County. I lived in Oak Ridge for a while and then moved to Knox County. But I always found that fascinating that pre-Burchett, nobody, you had all these workers on. I knew a lot of people that lived over here and contributed to Knox County, and there seemed to be little interest. So I think that's good. But it's not the same as having the chairman. I think we will do okay. I just don't know that we will see. I just wanted to temper people's expectations a bit because I don't think we will see. We were getting 20 to 30% plus ups. That's pretty remarkable, and I'm not sure we're going to see that going forward.
Good. Thanks for your chat.
Sure.
Any other questions, board or public? I don't think I see any other hands. All right. Well, thank you guys again. We sure appreciate the update. And at this point, I think I'll hand things to Shelley for public comment. I believe that's what we're doing next.
We actually have not had any public comments sent to us due to the virtual meeting format. We had asked for those by email prior to the event, but on your screen, you'll see if you do have public comment, please send that to us. We will take comment on this meeting through close of business on Monday, and it will be put into the minutes and we can address it further if needed.
Awesome. Thank you. And just as a reminder for the board members, if you have an interest in being on the budget issue group, please let staff know. You heard a fair amount today about the budget. So if that's something that you're interested in, we can certainly talk about that when we go over the work plan, but make sure you share with staff that you'd like to be in that issue group. All right, so at this time, I'll call for additions to the agenda. Anyone have an addition, please raise your hand. Don't see any hands. With that, motion to approve the agenda. Can I get a motion?
Move.
Wonderful, thank you. Second?
Second.
Second.
Wonderful, motion approved. And let's see, next meeting, in lieu of the regular board meeting, just as a reminder, we will not have a board meeting, but we would encourage members to make sure that you attend the virtual EMSSAB chairs meeting. That's noon to 4 on April the 20th and the 21st, and it will be streamed via YouTube. That's going to be awesome. YouTube. I don't think we've done that one before. So that's great. All right. And with that, this ends the presentation portion of the meeting. So presenters and subject matter experts, you're welcome to depart or stay if you'd like to, but we'll move on to board business. Bonnie, I'm going to hand things over to you for the meeting minutes.
Yes, sorry, I'm a little slow on this. I guess it's been so long since we've met that we have some minutes, I guess, that we need to vote to approve. Is there anybody that would like to vote to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, looks like the minutes are approved.
Okay.
Good to see you guys.
And do we have, Melissa, I think next is the work plan. Do you want to start there and we can just kind of tag team for questions?
Sure. So basically what we've done for this year's work plan is pick up right where we left off last year. So of course, we started with the budget one here in March. As Shell's already said, we're not going to have an April meeting due to the fact that we're having the EM chairs meeting. In May, we will pick back up with EMDF, and then in June, we will be doing the groundwater presentation. Those are our plans right now. In August, we're still debating on how we'll be doing our annual planning meeting. That could potentially be bumped till September and have a more abbreviated meeting, but we'll know more as we work through the next few months. Now, you will also see we don't have any tours scheduled at this point. We're not allowed to have more than one person in a car when we travel on the site. So that makes it really difficult to pull together a whole group for a tour. So as soon as they open the site back up, we'll start trying to work tours into it again. Jay mentioned the freshwater lab out at the site. We do that tour about every 2 years. So we'll be coming up on about that time. Once they, allow us back in, we'll try to set something up there.
Sounds great. And again, everyone, just so, if you have interest in these issue groups, so those are going to be your green line items, make sure you let the staff know. There's so much to learn if you participate in these groups, and you can be in more than one if you want to. And actually, I would really encourage that if you have the time. It's a really great way to learn more, I think, in a quick manner as you're kind of getting up to speed, particularly for our new members. So really great learning opportunity. And certainly we need folks to help us represent each of the issues as well. You'll notice in your packet, I'm not going to walk through the resources, but there are a series of resources that have been provided to you that outline the process relative to how we look at the issues, how we make recommendations, what the workflow is. So I would recommend and encourage you take a look at those just to familiarize yourself with the process. It definitely is a good way to kind of get a feel for how we kind of go about the recommendation process and what that looks like. And with that, I think I'm going to hand things over to Amy Jones to handle the election for FY 2021. Miss Amy, floor is yours.
Thank you, Shell. As many of you all know, we were not able to have an election last year due to COVID. And so it is time for us to elect new officers. There have been several that have let the staff know that they are interested in these positions. We do have chair, vice chair, and secretary to elect tonight. I'll start out with chair. And of course, our current chair, Shell Lohman, has put her name in to remain as chair. At this time, I will take nominations from the floor. Is there any nominations for chair? Are there any nominations? Are there any nominations? Being no nominations, Shell, you will remain as chair. You will be elected by acclamation. Congratulations. I think she's left us. Okay, vice chair.
Thank you, guys.
Vice chair. We have two names for vice chair. Leon Shields, who actually is our current vice chair, would like to stay in that position. But Chris, and I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce this right, Hamblin has also put his name in. He's been a member of the board since 2020. I will now at this time take nominations from the floor for vice chair. Are there any nominations? Are there any nominations? Are there any nominations? At this time, we will do election by, and Shelley, you want to do this by raising of hands?
Yeah, I was hoping that everyone could use the raise hand option that we were using to ask questions so that they could hold that up until I've counted each vote.
Okay, if everybody will go to the raise hand feature and vote for, and we'll start with Leon Shields. Shelley, you just let me know when you're done.
Okay, so I see that several people have abstained, so we will also need to have a note of that once this is done.
Hey, Shelley, are you sure that everyone understands exactly where to access the raise hand?
So the raise hand for most people is going to be, there's a little smiley face icon. It says reactions.
Well, now for me, it has a little button that says more with little dots above it. And when you touch that, the very top will say raise hand.
Okay, I think that's for phones and things with smaller screens.
My raise hand version is under.
Stuff on my screen, you have to click on the participants. And after, when you have the margin on the right hand side with participants, in the lower right corner, there is the button for raising a hand.
I'm also reaching out in chat to a few
how
people.
to raise your hand. That might be easier. If you need help with the raise hand feature, could you just drop a little note in the chat? Or just let us know. Okay. Shelley, do you feel like you have what you need now?
Let me know when we're ready to move on to Chris.
Go ahead.
All right, all those that would like to vote for Chris for vice chair, please do the same with a raise of the hand icon through either the chat or more, however it shows up on your screen.
So we had 9 for Leon, and I'm not seeing raised hands. Again, I had to clear all the raised hands, so you do need to go through the process again. Please don't vote twice. Okay, seeing as there are no raised hands, I had 9 for Leon, which is the majority of members here.
All right, congratulations, Leon. You will stay on as vice chair.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to secretary. We do have one name for secretary, and that is our current secretary, Bonnie Shoemaker. I will take nominations from the floor. Are there any nominations? Are there any nominations? Are there any nominations? Hearing no nominations, Bonnie, you will be elected by acclamation. Congratulations.
Thank you, Miss Amy, for helping facilitate the election for us this year. And thank you guys, everyone, for taking the time to vote and participate. At this point in time, we're going to hand things over to Melissa relative to the responses to the recommendations and the alternate DDFO's report. Melissa,
thank you. First, I'd like to congratulate our new chair, vice chair, and secretary. Since you kind of got shafted last year and only got to do part of a year, it's almost like last year never happened.
It does feel that way.
We don't have any current open recommendations. I did want to let you know that we have recently submitted our new package for new members. Hopefully, this package will get approved a lot quicker than our last package did. But we've done our part. We've got it up to headquarters, and it's now going through the review process. And that's all I have at this time.
Wonderful. That is great. Okay, Amy, let's transition over to committee reports. And Amy, do you have anything for EM stewardship?
Actually, I don't, other than our next meeting is March 24th at 6 p.m. It will be also by Zoom. We will be electing a chair and co-chair for that committee. Also want to remind everyone to be sure and sign up for the issue groups. Let the staff know if you're interested. And like Shell said earlier, you can sign up for more than one. And we do recommend it. You learn a lot by being in these groups. That's all I have.
Okay, great. Miss Amy, thank you very much. For the executive committee, we did meet earlier this last week, actually, and we will continue to meet via Zoom for the near foreseeable future as well. At that meeting, we did walk through the work plan to just kind of discuss everything that was coming over from last year to pick up where we left off. We also discussed the upcoming chairs meeting and the work that we've been charged with relative to the recommendations that they want to see as well. And other than that, I would just ask as a reminder to make sure and encourage you to check out the resources that were provided in the packet today relative to the recommendation process. Any additions to the agenda at this point? I have no closing remarks. If there are no additions, I will adjourn us for the evening. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, and congratulations to our chair, vice chair, and secretary.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
The U.S. Department of Energy's Oak Ridge Reservation is the site of a vital national defense facility and a modern computational and scientific center. But over the years, parts of the reservation have been contaminated with radioactive and other hazardous waste. DOE has been busy cleaning up those affected areas, but much remains to be done. Citizen input is a valuable part of that effort, and DOE welcomes advice from the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board, a citizens panel that provides independent advice and recommendations on DOE's cleanup of the Oak Ridge Reservation. The board provides input on a wide range of environmental cleanup operations underway at Oak Ridge National Laboratory, Y-12 National Security Complex, and the East Tennessee Technology Park. You can be part of this important work by attending the monthly meetings of the Oak Ridge Site-Specific Advisory Board. For more information, call or visit our website.